Let me tell you something that most politicians, media executives, and even seasoned war correspondents won't say out loud because they're too afraid of what it reveals. It's not the tanks, not the missiles, not even the death toll that breaks you. It's the innocence, the silent, stubborn, indescribable innocence that refuses to die, even in the middle of a war zone. When I first walked through the ruins of Gaza, I expected the dust, the damage, the despair. I'd seen it before. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, places the world lets burn while it argues over diplomacy. But this time, something was different. And I didn't see it in a headline, I saw it in a child. A small boy, maybe 6, playing with the wheel of a shattered bicycle. His home was gone. His father was buried. His face was smudged with ash and dirt. But there was a flicker, a laugh in the middle of devastation, a laugh that hit me harder than any shell ever could. That laugh didn't belong there. It had no right to exist in a place so broken. But there it was, defying logic, defying war, defying me. What do you do with that? How do you, as a grown man with years of education, reason, interviews, and analysis, how do you process a child who has seen more horror than most adults and still finds a reason to smile? I'll tell you what you do. You stop talking, you shut your mouth, and you listen. Because that child is telling you something the world's most powerful leaders have forgotten. That hope can't be killed by bombs, that joy doesn't wait for peace treaties, that faith, real, raw, unapologetic faith, isn't a ritual. It's not recited. It's lived. In the way that child grips his sister's hand and chooses to laugh anyway. This isn't poetic sentiment. This isn't emotional fluff. This is the brutal, beautiful reality of Gaza's children. They are teaching us, not through words, but through presence, that survival is not enough. You have to protect your soul. And let me be honest, in that moment, I felt ashamed. Ashamed of my comfort, my cynicism, my habit of intellectualizing everything, while these kids live through nightmares with more grace and composure than most of us ever will. I didn't see victims. I saw teachers. I saw prophets in the playground. I saw children showing the world what we all pretend to know, that purity isn't about perfection, it's about resilience in the rubble. That one moment, that child's laugh, cracked something open inside me. And whether you like it or not, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, the truth is simple. The children of Gaza aren't just surviving war. We are surviving, they're redefining what it means to be human. And if you miss that, you've missed everything. You don't truly understand faith until it's all you've got left. Not the rehearsed kind, not the Instagrammable quotes or Sunday sermons or neat little rituals people perform when the world's still intact. I'm talking about the kind of faith that's forged when the floor caves in, when the sky is falling, when the people you love most are buried beneath rubble, and you still whisper, God is with me. That's the kind of faith I saw in Gaza. Let's get one thing straight. Real faith doesn't come easy. It doesn't bloom in comfort. It doesn't thrive in safety. It doesn't grow under soft lights and peaceful prayers. It is born in the chaos, birthed in agony, and tested every single second under pressure that would make most of us collapse. I walked through neighborhoods that no longer existed, streets turned to ash, mothers with tears that had run dry, fathers digging with bare hands because machines wouldn't come. And yet, again and again, I heard it, Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. For what? For waking up, for surviving, for still having the strength to believe. I've interviewed presidents, I've confronted dictators, I've sat across from powerful men who claim to have unshakable beliefs, but I've never seen belief like I saw in Gaza, not once. You see, when everything is taken from you, your home, your safety, your family, what's left? What's left when hope is a luxury and silence is your only shelter? I'll tell you what's left. The raw core of who you really are. And in Gaza, that core was wrapped in faith, not bitterness, not rage, but an unyielding belief that their pain wasn't the end of the story. And that made me ask, what do I believe? What would I cling to if I was stripped of everything? It's a question we all avoid because deep down we're terrified of the answer. Most of us equate faith with comfort, with convenience. We believe as long as it fits our schedule, our lifestyle, our plans. But what I saw in Gaza flipped that on its head. These people believe not in spite of their suffering, but because of it. Because when the world burns around you and you still kneel to pray, that's not ritual. That's power. It forced me to reckon with something I never expected. That I, a man who is reported from global stages and sat atop media empires, might not know faith at all. Not the way they do. Not the way a mother believes even as she cradles her son's body. Not the way a child looks at the sky and says, Inshallah, as if tomorrow still belongs to him. That kind of faith, it doesn't shatter in chaos. It is born there. It doesn't crumble under bombs. It gets stronger. And it doesn't care whether the world is watching, because it was never about optics. It was always about the soul. They don't preach, they don't lecture, they don't wear robes or carry books. But make no mistake, the children of Gaza are teaching the world something we've forgotten. Something we pretend to understand in boardrooms, TV studios and dinner parties. But they live it every single day. Resilience. Not just survival, but soul-deep, dignified, defiant resilience. And let me tell you, when you see it in its purest form, it strips away every illusion you've built about what matters. I watched a boy, couldn't have been older than 8, carry water through a maze of shattered homes. Not for himself, for his neighbors, for his grandmother. He didn't stop once, didn't complain, didn't ask why this was his life and not the childhood he deserved. He just moved like a soldier, like a protector, like someone who knew that his actions carried more weight than any words could. You see, when children in the West get thirsty, they grab a glass. When children in Gaza get thirsty, they walk half a mile through concrete skeletons, dodging drones and broken glass, and still they carry more humanity in those small hands than most of us carry in our entire lives. It's in those moments, those unfiltered, brutal, breathtaking moments, that you realize something. These kids aren't just surviving war, they're redefining what it means to live with purpose. And what's staggering, what punched me in the gut, was how instinctively they served each other. A girl sharing her only piece of bread with a younger sibling, a boy handing his last bandage to a stranger. No fanfare, no applause, just reflexive kindness, reflexive strength, reflexive love. Tell me, where do they learn that? Who taught them that generosity is more important than self-preservation? That dignity is worth more than a full stomach? These are lessons we try to instill with seminars and self-help books, yet these children, with dirt on their faces and holes in their shoes, are living it with more grace and conviction than the most educated among us. And don't you dare reduce it to pity. This isn't a sob story. This is a warning, a wake-up call, a confrontation with your own soul. Because if they, with nothing, can still be kind, still be hopeful, still believe in each other, then what excuse do we have? In Gaza, resilience is religion. It's not something they claim, it's something they do. Every day, without reward, without recognition. And it makes our ideas of strength look weak. Their actions are their sermons. Their survival is their prayer. Their compassion is their protest. And if we're not watching, if we're not really watching, then we're not just missing the story, we're missing the point. It's one of life's cruelest paradoxes. The less someone has, the more they seem to believe. And nowhere did that truth hit me harder than in Gaza. In a place where roofs have been replaced by sirens, and where bedtime stories are drowned out by sirens, and where the earth is more graveyard than ground, I expected despair. What I didn't expect, and what I still struggle to comprehend, was faith. Not weak, not wounded, but bold, alive, absolute. They have nothing, and I mean that in the most literal sense. No security, no future, no comfort, and yet they believe in everything. In peace, in justice, in tomorrow, in God. And they don't just believe it in theory, they live it. Every morning they get up and face a world that wants to erase them. And still they say, Bismillah. Still they say, Alhamdulillah. Still they smile, still they pray. Let's be honest, in our world, faith is often conditional. We believe when things go well. We thank God when we get the job, the house, the promotion. But take those things away, strip us to the core, most of us would unravel. We'd question everything. We'd shake our fists at the sky and demand explanations. But in Gaza, they do the opposite. The less they have, the more they surrender. The more they lose, the deeper they trust. And that broke me, because it forced me to admit something uncomfortable, that maybe those of us with the most have the weakest faith, because it's never been tested, not really. I watched a man who had just buried his daughter walk back into his bombed out home and kneel in prayer. No camera, no audience, just him and God. I wanted to ask him why. Why not scream? Why not rage? But I couldn't, because the peace on his face told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't praying for what was lost. He was praying because faith was all he had left, and somehow it was enough. There's a purity in that kind of belief, a quiet strength the world can't understand. It's not born in privilege. It's not maintained by routine. It grows in the dark. It survives through pain. It flourishes in the most brutal of conditions, like a flower breaking through concrete, defying every law of nature. These people believe when they have every reason not to. And if that doesn't challenge your idea of what faith is, then maybe it's not faith you have. Maybe it's convenience dressed up as belief. So don't tell me faith only lives in churches, in cathedrals, in quiet country towns untouched by war. Faith lives in Gaza, in the eyes of a child with no shoes but a steady gaze, in the hands of a mother who lifts them to the sky, not to ask for wealth, but simply to ask for another day. And that kind of belief, it's not learnt, it's lived. It wasn't the bombs, it wasn't the blood, it wasn't even the destruction. What stayed with me, what kept me up at night, long after I left Gaza, was the silence. That deafening, soul-ripping silence that settled in after the chaos. A silence that didn't scream, but haunted. And in that silence, I saw something that no amount of headlines or briefings or reports could prepare me for. The eyes of a child who had seen too much, said nothing, and yet spoke volumes. There's a kind of silence that exposes everything, that strips you bare, that leaves you with no shield, no defense, no comfortable narrative to hide behind. That's the silence I met in Gaza. It was in the look a little girl gave me as she sat on a broken cinder block, clutching a cracked doll. She didn't cry, she didn't move, she just stared. And in that one gaze, without a single word, she told me more about the brutality of war, the depth of faith, and the fragility of life than 1,000 world leaders ever could. Because you see, sometimes the most powerful messages aren't shouted, they're felt. In the hush of rubble, in the pause between airstrikes, in the quiet that follows loss. And when a child looks at you with eyes that should still believe in magic, but instead reflect trauma and truth, it does something to you. It rewires you. It forces you to ask questions you don't want the answers to. That silence asked me, what would you do if this were your child? It asked me what kind of world allows this. And worst of all, it asked me, why are you only listening now? We've become experts at filling space with noise, debates, statements, tweets, proclamations. But Gaza taught me that silence, real, raw, uncomfortable silence, demands more. Because when words fail, when speeches collapse, when diplomacy becomes theatre, the eyes of a child will still tell the truth. And they don't need to shout to be heard. In fact, that's what makes it so unbearable. That child didn't ask me to take a side. She didn't ask me to explain geopolitics or religion. She simply looked at me and let the silence do the work. It pierced through my rehearsed lines and left me standing there, exposed, not as a journalist, not as a commentator, but as a man. You can dismiss words, you can debate facts, but you can't ignore a gaze that holds grief older than the child it belongs to. You can't argue with silence that carries generations of pain. And you certainly can't walk away unchanged. So if you ever find yourself in Gaza, don't listen to the noise. Listen to the stillness. Look into the eyes of those children. Let their silence speak. Because when it does, it will tell you everything you were too afraid to hear, and it will stay with you. Whether you want it to or not, you walk into Gaza expecting to witness a crisis. You brace yourself for the wreckage, the politics, the tragedy. But what you don't expect, what no one truly prepares you for, is the mirror, because that's what it becomes. Not a distant conflict on a faraway land, not just another headline, but a mirror. One that doesn't just reflect the world's failures, but your own, your comforts, your apathy, your silence. There's a moment, and it always comes without warning, when the chaos fades, just enough for the questions to start creeping in. Not about them, about you, about who you are when no one's watching, about what kind of faith you have when it's not being tested, and about whether everything you thought you believed in was just noise. I stood there in front of a boy no older than my youngest, who had just lost his brother to an airstrike. He didn't ask me for sympathy. He didn't beg for help. He simply said, "We're used to this." Not in anger, not even in sadness, just in cold, hard truth. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew about strength, about struggle, about faith, began to feel hollow. Because here's the raw truth. Witnessing Gaza isn't just about them, it's about you, about how you process the injustice you see, about whether your beliefs can survive being confronted by the brutal reality of children who believe harder with nothing than you ever have with everything. That's what hit me hardest. The children didn't try to convince me of anything. They didn't have to. Their lives, their resilience, their prayers whispered into smoke-filled nights, it all forced me to look inward, to ask myself what I stand for, to face the possibility that maybe, just maybe, my understanding of faith had always been superficial. It made me uncomfortable. It was meant to, because that's what happens when truth smashes into privilege. You start to feel it, the weight of your detachment, the ease with which you scroll past suffering, the way you intellectualize pain rather than feel it. I came to Gaza thinking I'd observe, report, document, but the children had other plans. They didn't just exist in front of my camera. They reached through it. They made me a participant in something far greater than a news story. They forced me to question the foundation I'd built my life on, dismantled my mind to find the weak memories and let my limbs go limp. I experienced the florin of life I'd forgotten. They taught me to respond to pain. They forced me to question the foundation I'd built my life on. And that's when it hit me. They weren't trying to change the world, they were changing me. They didn't say, believe what we believe. They didn't say, feel what we feel. They just existed, raw, broken, beautiful. And that was enough. Enough to make me doubt, enough to make me listen, enough to make me see faith not as a doctrine, but as a decision, one they made every single day under fire. And when that realization sinks in, you don't just walk away, you carry it. Forever.